If you've spent a lot of time on queer Discord, you've likely seen a lot of cats. Like a lot. For the record, do you love cats? Yes. Yep. Yes. Yeah. Who doesn't? Cats are awesome. Cats are awesome. And a cursory glance at the gay cat survey data reveals that trans people, trans girls especially, like cats. So now we can get around to formally answering. To start our little expedition here, I'd like to look at a common stereotype. You probably know it. The communist, pro-gun, anti-turf, not quite a furry trans cat girl. As ContraPoints described it,
they're trans women, usually attracted to women, who express their identity online through cloying, neotenous, otaku memery.
She describes a stereotype of a transbian that spends a whole lot of time online, that constantly memes about gender, and that heavily employs anime culture and tropes. Anime is an interesting selection here because the medium portrays women, and in our case, cat girls, in an aggressively feminine and sexual manner. They have big eyes and large heads to indicate innocence and are often oblivious to sexuality while inadvertently invoking it. The girly fluff that makes them appeal to young men also makes them appeal to trans lesbians who are looking to express femininity and repressed sexuality. However, unlike a young man, they are both attracted to cat girls as a platonic ideal of innocent femininity, and also want to emulate it for themselves. Many trans women fear the archetypal, mannish transvestite, and what better to repel that archetype than an anime girl? Perfect skin, tiny proportions, and perfectly female fashion. I am generalizing, but identifying and representing themselves with cat girls may diminish a trans woman's fear. Reddit user ThisName argues that doing so goes against the way masculinity is generally portrayed. It makes you feel cute while doing it, and it makes you think of cats instead of dysphoria or being a boy. And yet, it is not traversing the border into the forbidden stereotypical female activities. You can tap into cuteness and slightly affirm your euphoria without head-on being gender non-conforming. Their argument seems to hold water when closely examining the way cat girls act. They don't strive for traditional womanhood, some sophisticated and cisgender femininity, but for the entirely different state of being a pale thigh-high girl twink. Another element is the lesbian half of lesbian cat girl. Trans people, women especially, will often date within trans spaces as a safeguard from the, frankly, rancid world outside. They are much less likely to experience bigotry from within trans circles. What follows from this is that transbians dress for the job they want. Cat girls beget cat girls. However, we're straying from the point a little here. Trans cat culture is not exclusive to trans lesbians. It applies to a much broader group encompassing nearly anybody queer or feminine. Our working theory does not account for all of them, so more is clearly going on. Trans people are super autistic. Between 4.8 and 26% of trans people are autistic compared to the general rate of 1 or 2%. And online spaces already have a higher concentration of autistic people, so the transgenders on the internet have turbo autism. Many people, including me, see this as causative, not just in the sense that trans people are more accepting of disabilities, but in the sense that autism heavily influences their gender. Because autism is, in most ways, a social disorder, and gender is, in all ways, a social construct, it tracks that many people feel the two are linked, something called autigender. In his 2022 book, Unmasking Autism, social psychologist Devin Price examines autigender.
Perhaps because so many of us are alienated from mainstream neurotypical life, we come to identify with fantasy creatures, aliens, robots, or animals instead of the people around us.
They make the link between autistic alienation and identification with social roles outside of the confines of the gender binary, gender, or humanity as a whole through autigender. A perfect example of this is the furry community, a community based entirely around taking on the identity of an anthropomorphic animal.
Are you allowed to take your mask off?
No, you can't take your mask off.
Really?
They'll kill you.
A fursona functions like a gender in some ways, sometimes called otherkin or Etherian. Applying this information a bit, we can look back at our more granular example of cat girls, many of them relegated to online spaces by autism, and see them developing that non-human connection. I can see how, when on the sidelines of gender, they develop their own, how they develop their gender through cat girls, through autism, through cats generally, because cats are autistic. Relative to their size, cats are quiet. They only meow or purr in certain cases, they have a light step, they spend time away from people, they have repetitive grooming habits, and they are resistant to change. Autistic people are often quiet, walk on their toes, spend lots of time alone, and fall into strong habits. Another piece of our puzzle is that autistic people see themselves in cats specifically because cats represent autism in a unique way. An autistic trans friend of mine reaffirmed this, saying, "Cats are autistic, this is factual." A Therian autigender friend commented, "I identify as Therian, feeling more animal than human, due to social complications with being a gay trans autistic in the public school system, so I almost feel like seeing other animals is like how autistics, intentionally or not, mimic behaviors of their neurotypical peers." Do you think any of your identity is linked to or reaffirmed by cat videos on the internet? Yeah, I think so. A lot of people feel that their gender and autism are linked to cats and that it plays a role in shaping their identity, at least partially. Autistic people link up with cats in an almost religious way, welding it to their online persona in a way that intersects with being trans, utilizing them as a way to get out of their gendered or human confines. Being trans is exhausting. Being autistic is exhausting. Being raised online is exhausting. Dysphoria, overstimulation, social anxiety, being frustratingly inarticulate, and having a missing identity is exhausting. People need a break, especially trans and autistic people. I understand why they spend so much time in reiterative online chambers. It makes sense that transbians want to retreat into alternative kawaii ideals of femininity, that autistic people want to place themselves outside of humanity, that people want a simpler internet, that people just want to look at cats.